Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to the Celtic Way. It is Monday, the 8th of December. I feel like I've not done this in a wee while, Tony. Happy to be back with you. You join us over under 24 hours after Wilfried Nancy's first game in charge of Celtic. It was a 2-1 defeat to Hearts. Before we get into talking about that game and everything and what the manager had to say after that defeat, I'd like to say a big thank you to the sponsors of this video. It's Simply Furniture. They're located in Hillington, Glasgow. It's Simply Furniture is an independent brand dedicated to bringing luxury and contemporary style into homes across the UK. With over a decade of experience in furniture retail, they meticulously source only the finest pieces, curated for quality, comfort and timeless design. From elegant sofas to statement dining sets, their hand-picked collections offer exceptional value without ever compromising on style. Their dedicated team ensures your furniture is delivered with care right to your doorstep. And if you want to see the beauty up close, you can visit their stunning showroom and mention the Celtic Way for a special in-store discount. Tony, where do we start after yesterday's game? It was a 2-1 defeat to Hearts. They go 3 points clear at the top of the Scottish Premiership table thanks to first half goal from Claudio Braga, second half header from Ocean McEntee. There was a late, potentially a late comeback on the cards when Celtic scored through Kieran Tierney, but it was too little, too late. I'll just pass the floor to you. What did you make of Wilfried Nancy's first game as Celtic manager?
I think, excuse me, it's not the start to the new era that everybody wanted, was it, Brian? Let's be honest. I've been pretty consistent with my views on this. I'm still mightily perplexed as to why Wilfried Nancy was brought in for this week in particular. I think Martin O'Neill deserved to get these 3 games and the cup final. Hindsight's a great thing, but I was consistent in my views on that, and I said Martin O'Neill should stay until after the cup final. It's a huge week for Celtic in the context of the season. He's behind the 8 ball already. Now, his after-match comments about losing or winning, I think there's been a bit of a hysterical overreaction to that.
Agreed.
I think if you drill deep down into the words, he's not saying he's not caring about winning. That's just further from the truth. But what I will say is somebody needs to take him aside and say to him, look, these are all right messages to say to your players to get a performance out of your players. But see, when you're saying it on live broadcast, it rubs the Celtic supporters up the wrong way, because the only language they understand and the only language any Celtic manager should understand is winning. And Martin O'Neill said it himself. And granted, the last couple of games under Martin O'Neill weren't exactly great watches. Or 3 games, St Mirren, Hibs and Dundee. So maybe that new manager bounce that O'Neill got was coming to an end, but I would still rather he was in situ this week. And there's all sorts of issues yesterday. It was just poor, Brian, all round. I'm going to come to something in a minute, but a big bugbear for me, Ryan, was my biggest concern about yesterday was the half-time team talk. What happened after that? Because the second half Celtic were incredibly flat, really, really flat. Because they started very well and they missed a couple of great chances, Dyson Maida, and had they scored one of them, then it might have been a completely bit. What happened at the interval and then what transpired in the second half was my biggest cause for concern, because Celtic didn't raise a gallop in the second half, and that second half performance was very reminiscent of the Rodgers type stuff that we saw at the end of his reign, possession for possession's sake. So that worried me about why the manager failed to inspire Celtic, having gone in 1-0 at the interval, probably undeservedly so. And that, for me, was the biggest takeaway for me yesterday, that Celtic weren't inspired in that second half for the rousing comeback, which I thought would happen, but it didn't.
Yeah, what I would say is that, first of all, I think we need to... I'm going to try and be as balanced as I can when talking about yesterday's game, and we're all disappointed with the fact that Celtic lost, and the fact that it's to the league leaders who, admittedly, they did their job on the day. They got their win, and they'll be happy with their win. But their 2 big chances they scored, they took their chances. It's not as if they were hammering Celtic's goal or getting chance after chance. I mean, it wasn't like the game at Tynecastle at all. I thought for the first 20 minutes to half an hour, Celtic played some really nice stuff and just didn't take their chances. I did see some changes in the way that Celtic were playing. They were trying to get forward as quickly as possible. They weren't spending a lot of time on the ball. But I do agree with you, Tony, in the second half. And the goal changes the team talk at half time. It was a mess of a goal to concede. Everybody stops, including the Celtic captain and Austin Trusty, and they're all waiting for an offside call that doesn't come because Arne Engels is playing everybody onside. But that team talk completely changes, because they would have been disappointed going in at half time, nothing each, because of the way they dominated that first half. To go in at 1-0 down, was a big disappointment. And yeah, I've got to agree with you. I'd be keen to hear what was said, because they came out and it was so pedestrian.
I needed a reaction, Ryan, and I didn't get it from the players. And listen, it's the manager's first game. I think everybody is behind them and is desperate for him to succeed. And, people saying that Celtic don't have the personnel, they don't have the players. Granted, in January is a huge month. It was the same players that Martin O'Neill worked with, and he got an instant manager bouncing. And so that was my only cause for concern. The tactics board, I don't have an issue with that, Ryan. How else are you meant to get your message across?
I've got to really just back you up there completely. I think there's been absolute hysterics online over a tactics board, and loads of managers do this. Wilfried Nancy's been doing this all his career. There's clips of him in Montreal and Columbus Crew using a tactics board, and he's a new manager who's only had one or two training sessions with his new team.
So if you're trying to put a message across and you bring out the tactics board, then so be it. It's a tool that managers use. So, I mean, I can't understand this, jumping on that right away. I think lots of people are just want to jump on him straight away because he didn't get a win off the bat. I think everybody is disappointed, right? I get that. But you have to temper that with, he was on the door a couple of days, but he kind of went against the grain of what he said, didn't he? He was going to introduce things gradually. He put his stamp all over that team yesterday with the 3-4-3. I'm not saying that's why they lost, but that wasn't a manager. He didn't back up his words with his actions. He just went straight in and changed everything around. So I can understand the tactics board coming out, because in the second half, Celtic looked a bit lost. I think lots of players didn't exactly know their instructions. And as I say, that was my only worry, Ryan, that at half time you have to galvanise that team and say, right, calm down, because when they got forward at speed and it clicked, they got in on goal. Just so happened Dyson Maeda had one of those Dyson Maeda days where he couldn't score it. He takes an extra touch for the one that he hits past the post, which just takes him away from goal, and he kicks it the way he's facing. Had he not taken that touch and hit it the way he was facing, he would have burst the net. So, these are the fine margins, but you cannot switch off, as you said, in the box at the end of the first half, and you cannot switch off at the box and corners against a team who have a designated set-piece coach, and it shows. So these are things that you'll learn. And as I say, the stuff about winning and losing, I get what he's trying to say, but not all Celtic supporters are on board with him yet. So I think he has to be taken aside and said, look, if you're going to say these things, you have to make your message more clear and really tell people what you mean, because lots of fans are just, they're unhappy at the situation. They're unhappy with the board, and they're unhappy at the timing of when he's brought in. This is a huge week in the context of Celtic season, Ryan, and they've started with a defeat, and I'm not. And on the basis of that evidence yesterday, it's entirely plausible that his first 3 games could end in defeat. You wouldn't wish that on him. I don't wish that on him. But you've got a foreboding sense of doom about Roma, and you're not as sure as you maybe were. We've always bigged up Stephen Robinson and his teams, and I think St Mirren will have taken great heart from that yesterday and think, okay, if Hearts can do it, then we can also do a number on Celtic. as I say, the timing for me about bringing him in is a huge issue.
It's an issue, but he had to get brought in at some point, Tony. And
Yeah, I
as
get
James
that,
Dave said,
Ryan. I just thought it was a natural cut-off point after the cup final. That's just me. So, and lots of people speculating about if he loses the cup final, he loses his job. That won't happen.
nah,
But if he loses the cup final, the noise that you're hearing just now, it'll reach a crescendo.
It's just, I think a lot of people are reacting out of disappointment more than anything else, because they were going into the game. The fact that Martin O'Neill had steadied the ship and had done well and had closed that gap on Hearts, only for another gap to be opened between the two sides. Listen, and I agree with what James McFadden had to say yesterday. Martin O'Neill could have lost that game yesterday. We'll never know if Martin O'Neill would have won, lost, or drew that game yesterday. That's all hypothetical, and we'll never truly know the answer to that. But there are some points to be taken with regard to what you're saying about the timing, etc. But these are the cards that Celtic have been dealt with. These are the cards that Celtic are playing with at the moment, and they've got to deal with that. The manager's in. It's not been a good start, but they've got to move on and push forward, and all eyes are on that Roma game. I just want to bring up what Wilfried Nancy had to say after the game. So he was asked, not the start you were looking for, Wilfried, can you sum up the day? He said, listen, I think that we had a really good first half and we unbalanced them many times, but after that, the final pass of the execution, we rushed a bit. But I think that we saw really good things in terms of playing with rhythm, to be able to combine how to unbalance also the man-to-man, and how to unbalance a team with a lot of players behind the line. So I think that we had really good things regarding that. Obviously, we conceded the goal in the first half. I think that we could have done better to step up the line a little bit more, I think. After that, the second half, we kept going to attack, and when we conceded the second goal, we started to put in cross. And I think that we needed to combine a little bit more to attack the box with numbers, because they are really good defensively with big, tall guys. So I think we needed to play quick, but we needed to also have more runs, more numbers between the line and also inside the box. But again, the spirit has been really strong, and I'm really pleased with the mindset of the guys. It's not easy for them to adjust regarding what I wanted, but I saw many, many good things. So the idea is to rewatch the game, show what we did well and what we need to improve. What's your take on that, Tony? Specifically the second half. I'm not sure I necessarily agree with what the manager had to say with regards to what he saw in the second half from his team.
I tell you what I am going to do. I'm going to exempt him from any major criticism, because he's just in the door. He's watching certain things, but Ryan, what I can't exempt is the players. Some of those players, Rio Hatate, Arnott Engels, and Benjamin Nygren yesterday. Here's a novel concept to all three of them. See if they pass to a Celtic player, it helps. Rio Hatate in particular yesterday, I was there as a spectator with my father, and there were no words. I just kept shaking my head, and diplomacy stopped me from losing the rag. I really can't and it's no coincidence that managers have called him out and said he's wasteful in possession, because he is. He can be the weakest link at times. He's a talented player, but my goodness, when he reverts to that type, he'd be as well as sitting beside myself and my father yesterday. He could not find a Celtic player with a football yesterday, and then that kind of malaise in that midfield spread to the likes of Arnott Engels and Benjamin Nygren, and I don't like singling out individual players, but yesterday I felt that the midfield was dreadful. When it clicked, the couple of times it clicked, they managed to get through, and that was kind of like the opening 15, 20 minutes. But that apart, the manager is looking at various things, and I get all that, and he will defend these players. I understand, but I don't think I saw what Wilfried Nancy saw in the second half. Second half in particular for me, Ryan, we had possession for possession's sake and didn't really go anywhere. And in the first half as well, there was a moment where I looked at Wilfried Nancy and he was imploring Austin Trusty to make use of the space, because every time Austin Trusty picked up the ball, he had acres of space to go into, and all he had to do was run into the channel, and then and Hearts would have to come towards him. And too many times he was just content to play it out wide or shuttle it back to Liam Scales. And, football's about risk taking. I didn't see enough risk taking yesterday in terms of trying to get it forward at speed. And again, if that's what the manager's telling you and you're not understanding, then these are things we're going to have to work on. But the amount of times Austin Trusty picked up the ball and was hesitant not to go forward with it. Again, communication issues, fine. As I say, I'm accepting Wilfried Nancy because he's just in the door. And I don't think he deserves to be, to go in studs up on him because he's getting used to everything. But I just think he has to be a wee bit more clearer with his message, both to the players and also what he's saying when he's speaking to media outlets as well. When you're talking about all this kind of philosophy about winning and losing, there's only one philosophy in Glasgow when it comes to winning and losing, and it's the former, not the latter. End of story, end of message.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. Just on the team yesterday, obviously it was a change in formation, and you mentioned Austin Trusty, and he did play a big part in the concession of that first goal because he stops as well as Cal McGregor. Then he just simply cannot get to Claudio Braga, and it's a good finish from the Portuguese player, but that goal was happening in slow motion and you could see it coming about 5 seconds before it happened, and unfortunately the defenders, whether that be Cal McGregor who was acting as a defender or Austin Trusty the centre back, just couldn't stop it from ending up in the back of Kasper Schmeichel's net. Just on Austin Trusty, and it was a good point that you made about him not being brave enough. Do you think that was a purposeful tactic from Hearts' perspective? Because I noticed yesterday that there wasn't a lot of pressing going on when it came to Austin Trusty. It was almost as if Derek McInnes set up his side to allow him to have the ball and allow him to move forward, kind of similar to maybe what the Motherwell manager did with Grant Hanley a couple of weeks ago. Would you think that was maybe a tactic that McInnes used because he was quite comfortable with the fact of having Austin Trusty in possession?
Do you know what? I mean, there's a whole rewriting of some narrative here that Hearts were brilliant yesterday. Hearts were just resolute and dogged and determined. And
they were organised, Tony.
Aye, that's it.
That's the difference.
That was it. That's a prerequisite in football to be organised. But I didn't see anything from Hearts that said to me that, they're title challengers. They're title challengers because they got the result and they're 3 points clear at the top. But if you're asking me, can Celtic get better and can they reel Hearts in? Of course they can. So I'm not perturbed per se. I'm more concerned about Celtic, but all Hearts had to do was be organised yesterday. I think that says a lot about your own team, does it not? That you can't break down that rigid, disciplined organisation from a team who took the most or made the most of their opportunities when they came along.
Yeah, they took their chances. They took their two. It was a really good header from McEntee for the second goal, and it was there was always that worry being 1-0 down. I thought that Celtic were okay to an extent at the start of the second half. They were trying to make things happen, but the second goal just totally knocked the stuffing out of them. Is that an area, Tony, that you want Celtic to be looking at more closely, the set piece areas? Because it seems as if in football a lot recently, particularly in the Premier League, but also in other leagues too, there's more of a focus on set pieces. Hearts have now got their designated set piece coach, and it's paying off because they're good defensively and they're really strong offensively and at the other end of the park. You're on mute.
Yeah. Sorry. I don't know, some works truck or something has just turned up outside my house. If you can hear it, I'm very sorry. Because where I am backs onto my back garden. Yeah, listen, that Hearts utilised all the kind of strings to their bow, shall we say. But I still think the set piece goal could have been prevented. To me it looks like a free header. So you've got to defend that better, Ryan. It's simple. And then also, you mentioned it as well, you just cannot switch off. For the first goal, several players switched off, and then, as you say, looking for an offside flag that doesn't come. You know, and everyone in the stadium thought it was offside, but the TV pictures clearly showed that it wasn't offside. So you have to, you have to challenge for that ball. You have to make sure that Braga doesn't get shot away. We all know Braga's a tremendously talented and gifted footballer, so you didn't need any warning about what he can produce. But yeah, I just, as I say, I wasn't particularly impressed by Hearts. I have to say, the most impressive thing about them was they got the result and they're 3 points clear at the top, as I said. So, you have to credit them for that, and they've come to a ground where they don't, which is traditionally hasn't been favourable to them, or historically they don't get results. So yeah, and going back to your kind of initial point about allowing Trusty the ball, but as I say, Trusty didn't do much with it, did he? And there was lots of times, especially in the first half, when he could advance, deep into Hearts territory meaningfully, and he chose not to. Don't know if that was part of what he was instructed to do, but as I say, at one point I saw Nancy screaming at him to get forward and be quicker and sharper, and he did a lot of that. He was very animated at times, Wilfried Nancy, if you watched him on the touchline. So I don't know if the players were carrying out the instruction or an instruction wasn't clear to the players, but so yeah. But the players, I think, need to take responsibility at times. I think he has spoken about that, and those who have spoken about Nancy said there's that player autonomy, isn't it? They need to work it out for themselves. And I think yesterday Celtic struggled to work it out for themselves yesterday.
Yeah, would agree with everything that you've said there. Just going through the team yesterday, it was Austin Trusty that started alongside Liam Scales, and Kieran Tierney started as well. Then there was a bit of an overflow in the midfield. Arnott Engels, Callum McGregor. You had Benjamin Nugent in there as well, Rio Hatate. Then there was the wing options, especially one of the players that I found really disappointing yesterday, once again, unfortunately, was Sebastian Tenekte. And there was a tweet yesterday, or a status that I read somewhere, and it was showing the amount of money that Celtic spent on 3 players, and they've got like one goal and 1 assist between them. I think it was Balikwisha, Tenekte, and Shin Yamada, who didn't even feature on the bench yesterday. Does that underline the bigger issues that are maybe at play for Celtic in terms of the recruitment that's badly needing to improve? Because again, Tenekte failed to make an impact. There was a point in the first half where his head completely fell. That was after winning a corner. He was shaking his head, was really annoyed with himself. Didn't understand that at all. I would want him to keep on going rather than lose belief in what he was doing. Michel-Ange Balikwisha, it's another game we've not seen any of him. Shin Yamada not even on the bench. Other players not featuring too. Johnny Kenny coming off the bench. Recruitment's key in January, isn't it, Tony?
Ryan, this team needs about 4 or 5 players in January. You keep getting told that January is a very difficult window to conclude business, but there's a real key positions here. You mentioned Sebastian Tenekte. His contribution of late, it's pretty negligible, hasn't it?
He's not contributing anything.
Yeah,
he's not. And just quickly, just as a Celtic winger, in order to thrive as a Celtic winger in any team, you need to bring goals and assists to the party, and he's bringing neither at the moment. He's not a goal threat, and he's not an assister for his teammates. He's not providing, and he's not goal scoring. So I'm not really sure what he's bringing to the team at the moment.
And he's playing like a player that's bereft of confidence as well. Yeah. Yang kind of jinks in and out and flatters to deceive, but every time you think Yang's taking a step forward, he ends up taking another 2 back. And it's again for me, flashes aren't good enough, Ryan. Inconsistency is not good enough if you want to play for Celtic, especially in the wide positions. You have to bring goals and assists. Neither or are bringing goals and assists. Even Dies and Maeda as well. 2 massive chances in the match. He's got to score them, Ryan. If he scores them, the whole place gets a lift. It's a different game, but he doesn't. But to me, they are gilt-edged opportunities which he should be taking, and unfortunately he didn't. So, off the top of the bat, striker is imperative in January, absolutely imperative, and amongst other positions. But we have frittered away a lot of cash on wingers who just aren't producing at the minute. Do you persevere with them, or do you go out and buy more? But I think we need about 4 or 5 players, Ryan. I have to say that. And that is an indictment on the recruitment element of Celtic. And I think that clip of Paul Tidsdale yesterday, kind of looking half asleep in the director's box, my goodness, that's a meme for the ages, isn't it? It's not a good look, is it?
The links between him and Wilfried Nancy, and especially Kwame Ampadu, who's the assistant manager of Nancy at Celtic, who worked with Tisdale at Exeter City. He's had his hands all over this appointment. This is very much to do with him. That was the reports that were coming out. So there are a lot more eyeballs than before, and there was some eyeballs on him before due to the recruitment and the fact that he was hands on under Brendan Rodgers in terms of bringing players to the club. There's even more pressure on him now, and just the optics of yesterday. There was a number of things yesterday, some things that can't be helped, and you knew that once you saw that clip of Nancy with the tactics board, you knew that was going to get, if it was to be an adverse result for Celtic, you knew that would be memed into oblivion online. That's just the nature of the beast in Scottish football and football in general. But yeah, those images of Tisdale, and listen, his eyes were closed for a couple of seconds before opening again, but it's all about the optics, and the optics just didn't look good at that moment in time.
Yeah, without a doubt. And also, as I say, there's things that need addressed, Ryan, things that need fixed quickly in this football team. As I say, Martin O'Neill got a tune out of them. Martin O'Neill, Sean Maloney, and Mark Fotheringham, and that's fine. But we are now under a new manager, a new regime, and it'll take time to get that message across. But the one thing he didn't really have was time, because he was thrust straight into a 3-game spell in a week where, I'm not saying they're season defining per se, but they were massive tests. First one against the league leaders, who are now 3 points clear. Granted, Celtic have a game in hand. You now have to go and win that game in hand. You need to win them all. You're playing AS Roma. There was new life breathed into your Europa League campaign. Could that be extinguished come Thursday? You don't know. But it's a step up in class and a step up in opposition. And then you have the cup final. I don't think anybody was entering into the cup final with certainty that Celtic were going to win. There's even less certainty now, and possibly
good result
concern
at the weekend against Dundee United too.
Of course. So, he's got a few days before Roma, then he's got a few days before the cup final. There has to be some serious work done here, Ryan, to get Celtic up for both matches. As I say, my biggest disappointment was the kind of lack of fire in the belly, shall we say, and a response to going 1 down against Hearts in the second half. That was my biggest disappointment in what the message that was conveyed in the dressing room, because I expected a Celtic team to come out firing on all cylinders, and it just didn't. So, and I talk about O'Neill, but I mentioned the kind of performance levels of O'Neill were dropping as well, with St Mirren, Hibs and Dundee. So, you can look at it both ways. I know the new manager has to start at some point, but I just felt that bringing him in this week in particular was risky beforehand, and it's now become an even bigger risk, having lost the first one of his tenure. I just didn't want, and all the vortex of negativity that's swirling around him at this minute. As I say, the two of us have refused to go in studs up, because he doesn't deserve that.
I don't think it's appropriate at all.
Yeah, social media is just, there's Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the word. It's borderline hysterical, Ryan. Some of the
I don't even
reactions
think it's
here.
borderline, Tony. I think that the
No,
reaction has been completely over the top and unjustified. And that's just my personal opinion. I had to actually take a step away from my phone last night because of what I was
yeah,
reading. It was actually getting quite. I wouldn't single out anybody whatsoever, but some of what was said last night on social media. And listen, that's not everybody. It's that social media isn't real life, and you find that out none more so than being at Celtic Park and gauging
yeah,
different people's opinion on the club. But it did border on personal last night towards a guy who's just in the
yeah.
door, not even what 3-4 days. Got to give him time. It was a bad
Aye,
result yesterday, but people are
aye.
taking it out the wrong way, in my opinion.
And even people were, fixating on things like he disappeared down the tunnel. He probably disappeared because he was disappointed, Ryan, and trying to compose himself because he knew he would have to face a barrage of media questions. I don't question managers' behaviour in such instances. Nobody be more crushingly disappointed than Wilfried Nancy himself. One would conjecture and imagine it's not what he wanted, but I guess what he found out yesterday is he knows what he's working with till January until he can improve that squad. He's already been told that he will get funds to improve that squad. So Celtic may have to limp on to January in terms of what they have at this minute, but yeah, he has to learn quickly that some of these players might not be good enough for the future Celtic team under him, but he has to get a tune out of them for the interim before he can strengthen
And that,
and bring in his own players that he needs and players that can play his system and he can really put his stamp on it. As I said before, can Celtic get better? Of course they can. It's not the result that anybody wanted, but you know, you just there's a couple of early signs where you're thinking, all right, need to get a handle on that and get a lid on that. The whole kind of winning and losing stuff. Just rein that in. I get that chat for the players in terms of instructions, but when you're talking to media outlets, remember that everybody's going to be fixated and latch onto your every word, and some things might get lost in translation there. That's all I would say.
yeah, somebody's coming up and saying he doesn't have an issue with Nancy going up the tunnel. I actually agree with that. I kind of wanted the Celtic players to go up the tunnel straight away as well after that result. That was a very weird last 5 minutes to that game where Celtic score what looked to be, by all accounts, a consolation goal, and the goal music comes on. I was like, what is there to celebrate? Celtic are still chasing a goal to get fully back
Yeah,
into the game. It was a bit of a weird one. It was a weird atmosphere. Yes, that was the final point that I wanted to come on to. Nancy was asked about the atmosphere and it being quite subdued. He said that he focuses on the pitch and what he can do for his players to get better. And after that, the fans, they want to push us, they want to help us and sometimes to push us, so challenge and support all the time. For me, it doesn't change. I'm focused really on the pitch, what I can do better, what I can do to help the team to have a better performance, and what can I do to give confidence to the team. But again, it's only one game. They did well previously in terms of results. I showed them that we could have done something better, and the next time it's going to be the same too. But my job is to be really focused on the pitch, and after that, the fans. I'm with the fans, and they're going to push us. In terms of a new manager coming in, Tony, it was a bit of an odd atmosphere yesterday. Would you agree with me in that summation? I don't think it was helped by the fact that yes, there's outside issues going on between certain fan groups and the club, but there was points in that second half where it was really really quiet in a game that Celtic couldn't afford to be quiet. I think there needed to be a little bit more passion into the game, and that was sadly missing because of certain elements of the support not being there. I'm not going to get into details as to why they're not there. I'm not going to take any sides. I'm just going to say the fact that they weren't there wasn't a contributing factor to the result, but I don't think that it helped along the way in terms of getting the atmosphere up for the game.
I think it was noticeable, clearly
It was
noticeable,
very
Ryan.
noticeable.
And I also think as well, lots of Celtic fans are, back the manager and all that, but I think a lot of them are, their personal jury's out on the manager, Ryan. It has to be said. You could see that from the social media reaction last night. They're concerned. Lost his first game, giving them even more concern. Fine. But you have to be objective and take a step back and, and surround yourself by context of it all. He's only had a few days, there was a few training sessions. He ripped up a formation that they were used to in the interim period under Martin O'Neill to put his own stamp on it. It hasn't worked in game one. Back to the drawing board, as you say, or a tactics board to try and improve things for Thursday night. And then obviously he's got the cup final. So, he'll be a busy man between now and Thursday and Sunday. So he knows now there's no wriggle room. There is no margin for error. He'll be perfectly aware of that now. And I'm sure he'll have seen all of the, some of the vitriol on social media. He'll be made aware of it. So can Celtic get better under Nancy? Of course they can. But, it's all right saying he needs time, but time is something Celtic managers are not usually afforded, Ryan. So that's something, and that goes back to the timing of him, bringing him in such an important week where the possibility of losing 1, 2, or even 3 of these matches was stark. It was real. He wasn't coming in and, no game for this Celtic team at this particular time are what you would class as gimmies, because this Celtic team has to work hard to get every result. We can see that the product on the park and the personnel on the park, more often than not this season, has not been up to scratch. We have a new manager coming in who has to kind of come in and assess everything and then bring in players that he believes will fit into his philosophy, his system and his style. We get all that. But, there's a league to be won, Ryan. There's the knockout stages of the Europa League to try to get yourself into, and there's also a League Cup to be won. We cannot be diverting our attention from the kind of short-term goals, and those are our short-term goals at this minute, to get back to the top of the table and to win this cup and to see if we can get to the knockout stages of the Europa League. And if that's not pressure, then I don't know what is. And Nancy has walked into the eye of the storm and real pressure. And I feel for him in that sense.
Well, he said in numerous interviews that he likes the pressure. He wants pressure in football. That's the reason why he's a football manager. So you're hoping that he can, absolutely, especially after losing your first game in charge. But it's 3 days until his next game against Roma, and that's a fresh opportunity to get on, to get back on track, or to get onto some sort of track, because obviously lost his first game. Plunge coming in saying that I'm a happy clapper. Hopefully that's the first and last time I'm ever called that. I just don't want to. I'm just trying to bring a balanced view into proceedings. Tony, is there anything else that you want to discuss before we head off this morning? It's been a bit of a difficult show, talking about something that we wanted to come on here positive, talking about the first game going well for the new manager. Unfortunately, that's not the case. Is there anything else that you want to touch upon, or anything that we maybe haven't discussed so far?
Not off the top of my head, but if I do think of it, then I think it's the same duo that's on tomorrow, the dynamic duo. We'll be back tomorrow to talk more, so I'll maybe think about that. But no, I just think that your initial reaction is one of bitter disappointment, isn't it? It's not what you want for any Celtic manager. You want that, winning yesterday was paramount, and they didn't. So you have to dust yourself down. And in terms of Thursday night, you just hope that it's an improved performance and you can get a better result from it. We shall see. As I say, he'll have between now and Thursday to try and put things right, and we shall see what they're made of and see if he does get a reaction from them to, the what happened against Hearts. You got to consign it to the dustbin now. It's history now. You just have to move on and keep rolling. But there are problems there, Ryan. We can't run away from the fact that there are problems and issues with the team.
Yeah, there are problems, but they're not new problems. I guess that's the only silver lining that you can take from that. They're problems that have been prevalent all season for Celtic and they'll need to be addressed in January and beyond. Tony, it's been a pleasure being on with you this morning. Thanks for joining me. Thanks to the over 750 people that are joining us live on this platform, and thank you to the people that watch this video once it's been recorded and once it's on the YouTube side of things. We really do appreciate it, regardless of when you're watching it, both during it and after. Thank you for tuning in and joining us. If you like what we do, you can subscribe to us at www.celticway.co.uk/subscribe. You can also subscribe to us on the YouTube channel. If you press that button, it's completely free and you'll get notified when we go live with videos, both pre-recorded and the live videos such as this one. We'll be back tomorrow at the same time, same duo on tomorrow to discuss all things Celtic as we look ahead to a massive week in the club's season. Until then, Tony, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for joining me. Thanks to everyone for joining us, and we'll see you all tomorrow. Cheers, guys.